I think we've got a great, set of programming lined up here, and I think we can have a good time and learn a few things. For me, this is actually a pretty well-packed program. But for me, there's the highlight, without any question, is the return of Rafi Sefer. Where's Rafi? Welcome, Rafi. And, I'm looking forward very much to Rafi's presentation tomorrow evening, and also welcome to Rafi's father, A.B. Stoker. We're thrilled, delighted to have you here. I have to confess that after, I get very nervous after every meeting when I think, what are we going to do for the programming for the next meeting? It seems like an impossible task, and so Boris Weintraub, where's Boris? Boris comes over to my office. He lives actually about 3 blocks from the office, and we sit down and say, what are we going to do this time? And we draw up a list of things, and I have to say, I think it's a stellar lineup. This is a lot of anniversaries packed in here. It's the 60th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, 20th anniversary, as of yesterday, of the Tiananmen incident, and we are just a little over 10 years after the last major China symposium, when Bill Barnett was in, I think, in his last year, and there was a book that came out of that, and a lot of good memories. And I don't think we're not doing something quite as grand as that here, but we have some absolutely terrific China programming lined up, and then we'll follow that with Rafi's presentation and a really interesting discussion on Brazil on Saturday morning, plus, of course, on Sunday morning, and then plus tomorrow we have these incredible collection of books that have been published by our fellows and our members. I'm not going to say anything more right now. I have asked someone else to introduce Dan Wright, the great Peter Martin.
And the last time I saw him, he was dressed in a kind of a gray suit with light stripes. He was working with Pat Paulson at the time and bopping back and forth between Washington and China as part of something, I forgot the name here, but it's got 3 words in it. And that's what he was doing. I mentioned he was, as you well know, a China fellow. He was married to China in a way, in many ways. Still is. And when Lou and I went to visit him for my mid-fellowship visit, we arrived in his country just at the time when NATO had bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. It was a kind of an interesting time because Dan had a terrible kind of problem. He had to keep hiding us. That we were objects of great controversy. We were arriving in his country just after we had bombed his country. He had to sort of escort us well. It was a sort of a dicey time. I never really quite realized how dicey it was going to be. But we actually sort of got off the plane at the airport and we got into a taxi. And the taxi driver had mean things to say to Lou as he was loading she was loading the bags into the car, and asked her how it felt to be a dirty, rotten imperialist bombing China. Although Lou could not understand what she was saying, but Dan understood what she was saying. And then we got into the taxi cab and began to ride into town. We were going to spend the night in Chu En Lai's old campground. He had arranged this whole thing, a wonderful visit he was going to have for his executive director. And so we got in the cab and we began to ride into where we were going to go, to Chu En Lai's place. And as we rode along, we found ourselves, the cab sort of fell in line with a great mob of demonstrating Chinese who had little sort of chants they had written out on the pieces of paper, and they were chanting the chants, and they were marching along beside the taxi cab in which we imperialists were riding. And at that point, Dan, thank goodness, at that point had darker hair, and people say he looked Chinese. And so he could sit by the window, but we had the curtains pulled in the back seat. so we could not be recognized as bombers and imperialists or something like that. And we rode along beside this chanting group of people with carrying the banners and doing these chants from sort of prepared little things that they were shouting from. And we rode very carefully off to Zhou Enlai's headquarters, where then we had to be hidden by the people at Zhou Enlai's headquarters from the angry people who didn't want us to be living in. We were actually in Zhou Enlai's rooms. Dan had arranged this trip in a spectacular way so that everything was going to be right for his executive director to see China. And so there we were. Did we not have Zhou Enlai's own quarters? I have to tell you that Zhou Enlai did not have a soft bed. It was a hard bed. And then we were sort of urged not to hang around Zhou Enlai's headquarters, but to take walks. And we took walks. And then at dinner time, we were also urged not to eat in the dining room with everybody else, but to sit on the kind of little terrace overlooking the river, so we would not actually sort of interfere, not be a lot of sort of the active presence of imperialist bombers. And so it went. Dan had arranged the perfect visit for his executive director to China. He informed me that there was a kind of a policy on the part of the administration of China to have promising young administrators actually be sent out to the provinces to try out in various jobs. And he had arranged with the vice governor of Guizhou to meet us and to have dinner with us. And of course the vice governor of Guizhou did not particularly want to have dinner in any kind of visible way with bombers. And so the dinner that we were going to have sort of got replaced by a quiet meeting in a dark bar. Because I think the guy really didn't want to meet me or meet us. And so we went to the dark bar, and we sat in the dark bar, and his English was pretty good. And so we had a good conversation, and he did what you expect, and we talked about the bombing. He said that we did it on purpose. The Americans had done this thing on purpose to show the Chinese that we were boss and to keep them in their place, and that was the reason we had bombed them. And I said, I think that's probably nonsense. I think that Clinton is not as stupid as you say he is. And if this next century is going to be anything like a Sino-American century, the last thing you want to do is bomb the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. That is not a smart thing to do if you're going to have any kind of relationship for the next century or so. And so I think it probably is some kind of stupid mistake. He doubted that, but he was nice enough to sort of grant me the possibility of talking about that. We had a nice conversation about that, so it was a visit that actually opened my eyes to the reality of China and to also the reality of Dan Wright, who knew how to cope with things, knew how to make the introductions, knew how to actually have his executive director say things that were not really acceptable, but have people accept what he was saying. And he is a diplomat. He is very, very good at that kind of tightrope walking. And he has been tightrope walking ever since between us and China. His rope is taut. He's well taught. And I'm going to introduce Dan Wright to now talk to you about what he's up to.